My parents abandoned me as a child because I wasn't as smart as my twin, but when they tried to reconnect, I introduced them to my new family, and it didn't go well. Growing up, I always felt like the spare part in my own family. My twin sister Sarah was the shining star, the prodigy who could do no wrong. From an early age, it was clear she was destined for greatness, while I was just me. Sarah's brilliance sparkled in everything she did, whether it was solving complex math problems by the age of 5 or reading entire novels while I was still struggling with basic sentences. My parents, Ellen and Robert, made no effort to hide their favoritism. I remember one particular day when I was about 7 years old. Sarah had just won some prestigious national award for young mathematicians, and my parents threw a huge party to celebrate. Our house was filled with balloons, streamers, and laughter that seemed to echo endlessly. But amidst all that joy, I felt like a shadow, slipping through unnoticed. During the party, I had a small painting I'd worked hard on, hoping to show it to my parents. It was a simple drawing of our family, but I had poured my heart into it. I approached my mom, who was busy chatting with other parents about Sarah's future. "Mom, look what I made," I said, holding up my drawing with a hopeful smile. She glanced at it briefly, then looked back at her conversation. "That's nice, honey," she said absently, not even bothering to take the drawing from my hands. My heart sank. Sarah's achievements were always celebrated with grand gestures, while my efforts were met with indifference. It became a pattern, one that etched deep scars into my young heart. As we grew older, the gap between Sarah and me only seemed to widen. She skipped grades, was constantly showered with praise, and her accomplishments became the center of our family's universe. Meanwhile, I was left to fend for myself, always in her shadow, always the less important twin. By the time we reached high school, it was clear that my parents had placed all their bets on Sarah. They invested in her education, enrolled her in elite programs, and often took her on special trips to visit prestigious universities. I, on the other hand, was left behind, both physically and emotionally. It felt like I was an afterthought, someone they had to tolerate rather than love. One evening, everything changed. I overheard a conversation between my parents in the kitchen. They didn't know I was listening, tucked away behind the doorframe. My mom's voice was sharp and cold. "We can't keep wasting our resources on her, Robert. She's not like Sarah. We need to focus on our best chance at success." My dad sighed, a heavy sound that felt like a punch to my gut. "I know, Ellen, but what are we supposed to do? She's our daughter too." I felt a mix of rage and sadness bubbling up inside me. How could they talk about me like that? Like I was a burden, a waste of their time and resources. I wanted to burst in and confront them, but I was too afraid. So I stood there, silently weeping, my heart breaking into pieces. Not long after that, my parents made the decision that would change my life forever. One morning, they sat me down in the living room. Sarah was away at another academic camp, so it was just the three of us. The air was thick with an uneasy tension. "Sweetie," my mom began, her voice unnaturally sweet, "we've been thinking a lot about your future." I glanced between them, confusion and dread knotting in my stomach. "What do you mean?" My dad cleared his throat, unable to meet my eyes. "We've decided it would be best for you to live with Aunt Marge for a while. She can give you the attention and support you need." Aunt Marge lived several states away, in a small town I had only visited a few times. She was kind enough, but the idea of leaving my home, my school, and the few friends I had was terrifying. "But why?" I stammered, tears welling up in my eyes. "We just think it's for the best," my mom said firmly. "You'll have more opportunities there, away from the distractions here." The truth was clear. They didn't want me anymore. I wasn't as smart, as talented, or as special as Sarah, and they couldn't be bothered to invest any more time or effort into me. I was being discarded, cast aside like an old toy that had lost its charm. That night, I packed my bags, my heart heavy with a mix of anger, sadness, and a crushing sense of rejection. As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I promised myself that one day I would prove them wrong. I would find my own path, my own success, and show them that I was worth something, even if they couldn't see it. The next morning my parents drove me to Aunt Marge's house. There were no tearful goodbyes, no words of comfort, just a quick hug from my dad and a brief, perfunctory kiss on the cheek from my mom. As they drove away, I stood on the porch, watching the car disappear into the distance, feeling more alone than ever before. But that day marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one where I would learn to stand on my own, to find my own strengths, and build my own future. And though the journey was long and often painful, it was also the making of me. Aunt Marge's house was a far cry from the bustling, expectation-filled home I had known. It was small, cozy, and filled with warmth that I had rarely felt from my own parents. Aunt Marge was a widow, her husband having passed away years ago, and she had no children of her own. Despite her solitary life, or perhaps because of it, she welcomed me with open arms. "Welcome, sweetheart," she said, giving me a tight hug as I stepped through the door. Her eyes were kind and her smile genuine, a stark contrast to the cold, clinical treatment I'd received at home. The first few weeks were difficult. I missed my friends, my school, and even the chaotic noise of my parents' endless discussions about Sarah's future. I felt like a piece of my life had been ripped away, leaving a gaping hole. Aunt Marge did her best to make me feel at home, but the transition was hard. School was different, too. I enrolled in the local high school, where no one knew me or my sister. I was free from the constant comparisons, but I also felt like a fish out of water. Making friends wasn't easy, especially since I carried the weight of my parents' rejection like an invisible shroud. One day during lunch, a girl named Lily approached me. She was in my English class, a subject I had always enjoyed, even if I wasn't particularly outstanding at it. "Hey, you're the new girl, right? Mind if I sit here?" she asked, pointing to the empty seat beside me. I nodded, grateful for the company. "Sure, go ahead." Lily was friendly and talkative, the kind of person who could make anyone feel at ease. We quickly bonded over our love for books and movies, and she introduced me to her small circle of friends. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of belonging. As the months passed, I found myself adjusting to my new life. Aunt Marge encouraged me to explore my interests, something my parents had never done. I joined the art club and discovered a passion for painting. It was a way to express the emotions I had bottled up for so long, and I found solace in the colors and textures that flowed from my brush. One evening, as I was working on a painting in the small studio Aunt Marge had set up for me, she came in and sat beside me. "You've got real talent, you know," she said, admiring my work. I shrugged, still unsure of my abilities. "Thanks, but it's nothing special." She turned to me, her eyes serious. "Don't sell yourself short, sweetheart. You have a gift and you should embrace it. Your parents might not have seen it, but that doesn't mean it's not there." Her words struck a chord with me. For so long I had measured my worth by my parents' standards, always falling short of their expectations. But Aunt Marge was right. I had something unique to offer, something that was mine alone. With her encouragement, I began to believe in myself. I spent hours in the studio, pouring my heart into my paintings. It was therapeutic, a way to heal the wounds of the past and build a future on my own terms. Life at Aunt Marge's house wasn't perfect, but it was stable and filled with love. She became the mother figure I had always longed for, providing the support and guidance my own mother had never given me. We would spend evenings cooking together, laughing over silly TV shows, and sharing stories about her late husband, who had been an artist himself. Through her stories, I learned that life wasn't always about achieving greatness or living up to someone else's expectations. It was about finding joy in the little things, cherishing the people who cared for you, and discovering your own path, no matter how different it might be from what others envisioned. Despite the growing sense of security and happiness, there were still moments when the pain of my parents' abandonment would surface. On those nights, when the house was quiet and the memories were too loud to ignore, I would sit in the studio and paint until the sadness faded into the background. Each brushstroke was a step towards healing, a declaration that I was more than the sum of my parents' opinions. High school continued, and with it my sense of self-worth grew. I excelled in art, participated in local competitions, and even won a few awards. Aunt Marge was always there, cheering me on, her pride in me a balm for the old wounds. One day during my senior year, I received a letter in the mail. The return address was unfamiliar, but the handwriting was not. My heart pounded as I tore open the envelope and read the contents. It was a letter from my parents, the first communication I'd had from them since they left me at Aunt Marge's. "Dear Ellie," it began, "we hope you are well. We've been thinking a lot about you and wanted to reach out. We've missed you and would like to reconnect if you're open to it. Please let us know. Love, Mom and Dad." I stared at the letter, a whirlwind of emotions crashing over me. Anger, confusion, and a sliver of longing all fought for dominance. After all these years, why now? Why did they suddenly decide they wanted me back in their lives? Aunt Marge found me sitting at the kitchen table, the letter clutched in my hands. She read it silently, then looked at me with a mixture of concern and understanding. "What are you going to do, sweetheart?" I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "I don't know, Aunt Marge, I just don't know." The decision weighed heavily on me. Part of me wanted to ignore the letter, to continue building my life without them. But another part of me, the part that still longed for their approval, wanted to see if they had changed, if there was any chance of rebuilding a relationship. In the end, I decided to respond. "Dear Mom and Dad," I wrote, "I received your letter. I'm not sure what to think, but I'm willing to meet and talk. Let's take it one step at a time. Ellie." I sent the letter and waited, unsure of what the future would hold. But whatever happened, I knew I had a family that loved me, a passion that fulfilled me, and the strength to face whatever came next. Little did I know, the reunion with my parents would be far more complicated and challenging than I could have ever imagined. The days following my letter were a roller coaster of emotions. I kept busy with school and my art, trying to focus on the present rather than the uncertainty of the future. My parents' response arrived quicker than I expected, proposing a meeting at a neutral location, a small cafe in the town where Aunt Marge and I lived. The day of the meeting, Aunt Marge offered to come with me for support, but I decided to go alone. I needed to face them on my own terms. As I walked into the cafe, my heart pounded in my chest. I spotted them immediately, sitting at a corner table, looking older but still recognizable. My mom's eyes were the first to meet mine, and I saw a flicker of something that might have been regret. "Ellie," my dad said, standing up awkwardly as I approached. "Hi," I replied, my voice shaking. We sat down, and for a moment the silence was deafening. "We've missed you," my mom finally said, her voice breaking the tension. "We've thought about you every day." I looked at them, trying to read their expressions. "Why now? After all these years?" My dad sighed deeply. "We made a mistake, Ellie, a terrible mistake. We thought we were doing what was best for you, but we realize now how wrong we were." Their words felt rehearsed, but there was a hint of sincerity that I couldn't ignore. We talked for a while, exchanging updates about our lives. They spoke of Sarah and her successes, but it no longer felt like a knife to my heart. I had my own achievements, my own life, and I was proud of it. After the meeting, I felt a mix of relief and confusion. They wanted to reconnect, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to fully let them back in. I shared my thoughts with Aunt Marge that evening, and she listened patiently. "Take your time, Ellie," she advised. "It's okay to protect yourself. You've built a wonderful life here, and you don't owe anyone anything." Her words gave me strength. Over the next few months, I maintained a cautious relationship with my parents, meeting occasionally but keeping a healthy distance. During this time, I met Alex at a local art exhibition where I was showcasing my paintings. Alex was kind, funny, and appreciated my art in a way that made me feel truly seen. We quickly fell in love, and our relationship blossomed into something beautiful. We got married in a small, intimate ceremony, surrounded by friends and the new family I had chosen. Aunt Marge walked me down the aisle, tears of joy in her eyes. Life with Alex was everything I had dreamed of, and more. We supported each other's passions, built a home filled with love and laughter, and soon welcomed 2 beautiful children into our lives. My past was always there, lingering in the background, but it no longer defined me. However, my parents remained a complicated part of my life. They tried to be involved, but their presence often brought up old wounds. I decided it was time for them to meet my new family, hoping it would provide some closure and maybe even a path forward. I invited them over for dinner, wanting to introduce them to Alex and the kids. As the day approached, I felt a mixture of anxiety and hope. Maybe this was the chance to finally mend the broken pieces of our relationship, or maybe it would reveal that some wounds were too deep to heal. Only time would tell. The night of the dinner, my nerves were on edge. Alex, ever supportive, noticed my unease as we prepared the meal together. "Everything's going to be fine, Ellie," he said, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. "No matter what happens, we'll handle it together." The doorbell rang, and I felt a jolt of anxiety. "Here we go," I muttered under my breath. Alex flashed me an encouraging smile as I went to open the door. My parents stood there looking slightly awkward but eager. "Hi, Ellie," my mom said, her voice tinged with a mix of nervousness and hope. "Hi, Mom, Dad. Come on in." I stepped aside, letting them into the warm, welcoming chaos of our home. The kids were playing in the living room, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension I felt. "Mom, Dad, this is Alex," I introduced my husband, who shook their hands with a friendly smile. "And these are our kids, Emma and Jack." My parents' faces softened as they met their grandchildren for the first time. "Hello, Emma." "Hello, Jack," my dad said, kneeling down to their level. "It's so nice to meet you both." Dinner was a mix of polite conversation and awkward silences. My parents asked about our lives, showing genuine interest, but there was an underlying tension that was hard to ignore. The children, blissfully unaware, chattered away, filling the gaps with their innocent excitement. After dinner, as the kids played and Alex cleaned up, my mom turned to me. "Ellie, we really are sorry for everything. We know we can't change the past, but we'd like to be a part of your future, if you'll let us." I looked at her, searching for the sincerity in her eyes. "It's not that simple, Mom. You hurt me deeply. It's going to take time to rebuild trust." She nodded, tears welling up. "We understand. Just know that we're here, and we want to try." My dad, who had been quiet for most of the evening, spoke up. "We were wrong, Ellie. We see that now. You've built an amazing life, and we're so proud of you." Their words, though late, touched something in me. The anger and pain were still there, but so was a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to move forward. As the evening drew to a close, my parents said their goodbyes. "Thank you for having us, Ellie," my mom said, hugging me tightly. "We'd love to see you all again soon." "We'll see," I replied, managing a small smile. "Good night." After they left, I sat down with Alex, feeling emotionally drained. "That was intense," I admitted, leaning against him. "You did great," he said, wrapping his arm around me. "It's a start, Ellie. One step at a time." He was right. It was a start. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of possibility. My new life and my old one were colliding, and it was up to me to navigate the path forward. In the quiet of the night, as the house settled into peaceful slumber, I found myself reflecting on the journey so far. The shadows of the past still lingered, but I was no longer afraid. I had a family who loved me, a passion that fulfilled me, and the strength to face whatever came next. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I could finally reconcile the pain of my past with the promise of my future. My parents' visit had left me feeling a mix of hope and trepidation. A part of me wanted to believe they had changed, but another part remained wary. Despite my reservations, I agreed to meet them again, this time at a park near our home. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, perfect for a family outing. Alex and I packed a picnic and we headed out with Emma and Jack, who were excited about spending the day at the park. As we arrived, I spotted my parents sitting on a bench, their faces lighting up when they saw us. "Hi, Ellie," my mom called out, waving enthusiastically. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad," I greeted them, trying to keep my tone neutral. Emma and Jack ran ahead, giggling as they made their way to the playground. My parents watched them with smiles on their faces. "They're beautiful children, Ellie," my dad said, his voice filled with pride. "Thanks," I replied, sitting down on the grass and setting up our picnic. Alex joined me, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. We chatted casually, the conversation flowing more easily than it had during dinner. My parents shared stories from their travels, and I talked about my latest art projects. For a moment, it almost felt like we were a normal family. Sarah arrived unexpectedly, her presence sending a jolt through me. I hadn't seen her in years, and the sight of her brought back a flood of memories. She was as polished and confident as ever, her success practically radiating off her. "Hi, everyone," she said, her smile bright but guarded. "I heard about the picnic and thought I'd join." "Sarah," my mom exclaimed, clearly delighted, "it's so good to see you." She hugged our parents and then turned to me. "Ellie, it's been a long time." "Yeah, it has," I replied, feeling a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. We sat together, the atmosphere suddenly more charged. My parents' attention shifted to Sarah, and old feelings of inadequacy began to surface. I tried to stay engaged, but it was hard not to feel overshadowed. As the day went on, my parents made several comments comparing our lives. "Sarah's just been promoted again," my mom said, beaming. "She's doing so well." "That's great," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm really happy for you, Sarah." Sarah's smile was tight. "Thanks, Ellie. And I've heard you're doing well with your art. That's wonderful." The subtle condescension in her tone stung, but I tried to brush it off. I didn't want to let old rivalries ruin the day. But as the conversation continued, my parents' focus on Sarah's achievements became more pronounced, and I felt myself shrinking into the background. Alex noticed my discomfort and put his arm around me. "Ellie's been doing amazing things too," he said, his voice firm. "Her latest exhibition was a huge success." My parents nodded politely, but their interest quickly waned. It was clear that in their eyes, Sarah was still the golden child. The picnic ended on a bittersweet note, with my parents praising Sarah and offering lukewarm compliments to me. As we packed up to leave, Sarah pulled me aside. "Ellie, I know things have been difficult between us, but I hope we can move past it." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. "I hope so too, Sarah, but it's going to take time." She nodded, her expression softening. "I understand. Let's just take it one step at a time." We said our goodbyes, and as we walked back to the car, Alex held my hand tightly. "You're amazing, Ellie. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." I smiled up at him, grateful for his unwavering support. "Thank you, Alex. I don't know what I'd do without you." Back home, I reflected on the day. The reunion had been challenging, but it also felt like a step forward. My parents were trying, even if they still had a long way to go. And Sarah, despite our complicated history, seemed genuinely interested in repairing our relationship. It wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to navigate this path with an open heart and cautious optimism. The past had left its scars, but the future was still unwritten, and I was ready to take the next step towards healing and reconciliation. Inviting my parents to our home again felt like a significant step, one filled with equal parts dread and hope. Alex and I prepared meticulously, wanting everything to be perfect for this visit. I hoped that seeing us in our environment surrounded by the life we had built would help bridge the gap between us. The doorbell rang promptly at 6. I took a deep breath and opened the door to my parents, who stood there with tentative smiles and a bottle of wine. "Hi, Mom, Dad. Come in," I said, stepping aside to let them in. They entered, looking around with interest. "Your home is lovely, Ellie," my mom remarked, her eyes lingering on the family photos and artwork that adorned the walls. "Thank you," I replied, guiding them to the living room where Alex and the kids were waiting. Emma and Jack greeted their grandparents with enthusiastic hugs, their innocence and joy a stark contrast to the tension I felt. Alex offered drinks, and we settled into the evening. My parents asked the kids about school and their hobbies, genuinely trying to engage. For a while it felt almost normal, like we were just another family enjoying a casual dinner together. But the atmosphere shifted when my dad started to ask more probing questions about our life choices. "So, Alex, do you ever think about moving to a bigger city for better job opportunities?" he asked, his tone implying that our current life might not be ambitious enough. Alex smiled politely. "We're very happy here, Robert. This town has everything we need, and it's a great place to raise the kids." My dad nodded, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. "And Ellie, have you ever thought about using your art to do something more practical?" I felt a flash of irritation. "I'm doing what I love, Dad. I've built a successful career with my art, and it makes me happy." My mom chimed in, trying to smooth things over. "Of course, Ellie. We're just concerned about your future, that's all." The conversation felt like it was teetering on the edge of an argument. But Alex's calm demeanor helped keep things civil. He spoke about his work, our community, and the importance of balancing career with family life. My parents listened, though I could tell they still had their reservations. After dinner, the kids went off to play, and we sat down for dessert. My mom brought up Sarah again, sharing her latest accomplishments. I listened politely, but the comparisons were starting to wear thin. "Sarah's planning to visit next month," my mom said, her voice full of pride. "Maybe we can all get together again." I nodded, though the thought of another gathering with Sarah made me uneasy. "We'll see." As the evening drew to a close, my parents prepared to leave. "Thank you for a lovely dinner, Ellie. Alex," my dad said, shaking Alex's hand. "We're really proud of you," my mom added, though the words felt somewhat forced. "Thanks, Mom, Dad," I replied, walking them to the door. "Have a safe drive home." After they left, I slumped onto the couch, feeling drained. Alex sat beside me, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. "You handled that well," he said softly. "It's just so hard," I admitted, leaning into him. "They're trying, but it feels like they still don't really see me for who I am." "They'll come around," Alex assured me. "It's a process, and you're not alone in this." I nodded, taking comfort in his words. The evening had been challenging, but it was another step towards healing. My parents' visit had stirred up old insecurities, but it also showed me how far I had come. I had a family who loved me, a home filled with warmth, and a career that brought me joy. The journey was far from over, but I was determined to keep moving forward, one step at a time. With Alex by my side and the support of our children, I knew I could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The past might always be a part of me, but it didn't have to define my future. And that gave me hope. The weeks following my parents' visit were a delicate balancing act. I found myself caught between the desire to build a relationship with them and the need to protect the life I had created. I was determined to give them a chance, but their subtle criticisms and constant comparisons to Sarah gnawed at my confidence. One afternoon I received a call from my mom. "Sarah is visiting next weekend," she announced cheerfully. "We thought it would be nice to have a family dinner. Can you and Alex bring the kids over?" I hesitated, the memory of our last gathering still fresh. "Sure, Mom, we'll be there." Saturday arrived, and we drove to my parents' house. As we pulled into the driveway, I saw Sarah's car parked outside. My stomach churned with anxiety. Alex noticed and squeezed my hand. "It'll be okay," he said. "We're in this together." Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Sarah greeted us with a polite smile, but there was an air of superiority about her that set me on edge. My parents fussed over her, their attention focused entirely on her latest achievements. Dinner was a repeat of the previous visit, with my parents directing most of their questions toward Sarah. "Sarah's been offered a position at another prestigious firm," my dad boasted. "Isn't that wonderful?" "Congratulations, Sarah," I said, forcing a smile. "That's great news." Sarah turned to me, her expression unreadable. "Thanks, Ellie, and how's your art going?" "It's going well," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. "I have a new exhibition opening next month." My mom nodded absently, but her focus quickly shifted back to Sarah. "You must be so excited about the new job. What are your plans?" As the conversation continued, I felt myself shrinking into the background. It was as if nothing had changed, and I was still the lesser twin, always overshadowed by Sarah's brilliance. After dinner, we moved to the living room for coffee and dessert. The kids played quietly in the corner, their laughter a small comfort. My parents and Sarah continued their conversation, their voices blending into a dull hum. I felt disconnected, like an outsider in my own family. At one point, Sarah turned to me. "Ellie, I've been meaning to ask, do you ever regret not pursuing something more stable, like a traditional career?" Her question caught me off guard, and I felt a surge of anger. "No, Sarah, I love what I do. It might not be conventional, but it's fulfilling." My dad interjected, trying to diffuse the tension. "We're just concerned about your future, Ellie. We want to make sure you're secure." I looked at them, my frustration boiling over. "I'm fine, Dad. I've built a life that I'm proud of. I don't need to be compared to Sarah all the time." The room fell silent, my words hanging in the air. My mom looked taken aback, and Sarah's expression was one of mild surprise. "Ellie," my mom began, her voice wavering, "we don't mean to hurt you. We're just trying to understand." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. "I know, Mom, but it feels like you're always measuring me against Sarah. I need you to see me for who I am, not who you want me to be." There was a long pause, and for a moment I thought I had finally gotten through to them. But then my dad sighed. "We'll try, Ellie. We really will." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. By the time we left, I was emotionally drained. In the car, Alex took my hand. "You did great," he said softly. "It's not easy standing up to them." "It just feels like nothing changes," I replied, feeling the weight of old wounds reopening. "No matter what I do, I'm never enough." "You are enough," Alex said firmly. "To me, to the kids, and to everyone who truly matters. Don't let them make you doubt that." His words were a balm to my aching heart. I knew he was right, but the scars of my past were deep, and healing would take time. As we drove home, I resolved to focus on the present and the future I was building with my new family. The path to reconciliation with my parents was fraught with challenges, but I was determined to navigate it with strength and grace. Old wounds might have reopened, but they also reminded me of how far I had come and the resilience I had developed along the way. Back at home, I hugged my children tightly, finding solace in their unconditional love. The road ahead was uncertain, but with Alex and our kids by my side, I knew I could face whatever came next. The past would always be a part of me, but it didn't define me. My future was mine to shape, and I was ready to continue the journey, one step at a time. The tension from the last family dinner lingered, making every interaction with my parents and Sarah feel like walking on eggshells. Despite my efforts to bridge the gap, the comparisons and subtle criticisms continued to sting. I was determined to keep trying, but the strain was taking its toll. One weekend, my parents invited us to their place for a barbecue. Alex and I agreed, hoping that a more casual setting might ease some of the tension. We arrived with the kids in tow, greeting my parents and Sarah, who was already there, chatting animatedly with our mom. As the afternoon wore on, the atmosphere remained polite but strained. My parents fussed over Sarah, and I did my best to keep up the facade of a happy family. But beneath the surface, I could feel the resentment building. The breaking point came when my dad started a conversation about career choices. "You know, Sarah, your new job offer is just incredible. We're so proud of you," he said, beaming with pride. Sarah smiled graciously. "Thanks, Dad. I've worked really hard for it." Turning to Alex and me, my dad continued, "Have you two ever considered moving to a bigger city? There might be more opportunities for both of you." Alex, always calm and composed, replied, "We're very happy here, Robert. Our kids love it, and Ellie's art community is thriving." My dad's expression tightened. "I just worry that staying here might limit your potential." I couldn't stay silent any longer. "Dad, we've built a life here that we love. It's not about potential, it's about happiness." The conversation grew more heated, and my mom tried to intervene. "Let's not turn this into an argument. We're just concerned for you, Ellie." "I know you are," I said, my voice rising, "but you need to stop comparing us to Sarah. We're different people with different paths, and that's okay." Sarah, sensing the growing tension, spoke up. "Ellie, I didn't mean to cause any issues. I just want us all to get along." Her words, though well-meaning, felt patronizing. "It's not about you, Sarah. It's about them constantly measuring me against you." My dad stood up, his face flushed with frustration. "Ellie, we're just trying to help. Why can't you see that?" Alex stepped in, his voice firm but calm. "With all due respect, Robert, Ellie doesn't need to be compared to anyone. She's an amazing artist and a wonderful mother, and she deserves to be appreciated for who she is." The tension in the air was palpable. My dad glared at Alex, and my mom looked like she might cry. "We just want the best for you," she said softly. "I know, Mom, but your idea of what's best isn't necessarily what's right for us," I replied, my voice shaking. The rest of the evening was awkward and tense. We made small talk, but the underlying conflict simmered just below the surface. By the time we left, I was emotionally exhausted. In the car, Alex reached over and took my hand. "You stood your ground, Ellie. I'm proud of you." I nodded, tears welling up. "It's just so hard. I want to make things work, but it feels like they'll never see me for who I am." "They'll come around eventually," Alex said softly. "And if they don't, that's their loss. You've built an incredible life, and you don't need their approval." His words gave me some comfort, but the pain of the day lingered. At home, I tucked the kids into bed and then retreated to my art studio, seeking solace in my painting. The colors and textures helped soothe my raw emotions, giving me a sense of control and peace. As I worked, I reflected on the evening. The breaking point had been painful, but it had also been a necessary step towards asserting my independence. I couldn't keep living under the shadow of my parents' expectations. I needed to carve out my own path and define my own success. The journey towards reconciliation with my parents was proving to be more difficult than I had anticipated, but I was determined to keep moving forward, one step at a time. With Alex and our children by my side, I knew I had the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The future was still uncertain, but I was ready to continue the journey. The past would always be a part of me, but it didn't have to dictate my future. I was more than my parents' expectations, more than Sarah's shadow. I was Ellie, and I was enough. The aftermath of the barbecue left me feeling drained, but resolute. The confrontation with my parents had stirred up old wounds, but it had also solidified my determination to live life on my own terms. I needed to set boundaries and prioritize my own happiness and the well-being of my new family. Days turned into weeks, and I maintained minimal contact with my parents. I focused on my art, pouring my emotions onto the canvas, finding solace in the creative process. Alex and the kids were my sanctuary, their love and support a constant reminder of the life I had built. One evening, as we were having dinner, the phone rang. It was Sarah. I hesitated before answering, unsure of what to expect. "Hey, Sarah," I greeted her cautiously. "Hi, Ellie. I wanted to talk," she said, her voice surprisingly soft. "Can we meet up? Just the two of us. Curiosity and apprehension warred within me. Sure. When and where? We decided on a small cafe in town the next day. I arrived early, sipping on a coffee and mentally preparing myself. When Sarah walked in, she looked different, less polished, more vulnerable. She sat down across from me, and for a moment we just looked at each other. "Ellie, I'm sorry," she began, her voice trembling. "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation. You're right. Mom and Dad have always compared us, and it's not fair to you. I never realized how much it hurt you." Her words took me by surprise, and I felt a lump form in my throat. "Sarah, it's not just about the comparisons. It's about feeling invisible, like I was never enough." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know. And I'm sorry for my part in it. I was so focused on my own achievements that I didn't see what it was doing to you. I want to make things right, Ellie. I want us to have a real relationship, as sisters." Her sincerity touched me, and I felt a glimmer of hope. "I want that too, Sarah. But it's going to take time. We need to rebuild trust." "We will," she promised. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes." We talked for hours, sharing stories and memories, and for the first time I felt a genuine connection with her. It was a step towards healing, and it gave me the strength to continue setting boundaries with our parents. Over the next few months, I limited our interactions to short visits and phone calls. I was honest with them about my feelings, explaining that I needed space to find my own identity. They struggled to understand, but slowly, they began to respect my wishes. Meanwhile, my bond with Sarah grew stronger. We supported each other, navigating the complexities of our relationship with patience and understanding. It wasn't always easy, but we were committed to making it work. One afternoon, as I was working in my studio, I received a call from my mom. "Ellie, can we talk?" she asked, her voice unusually soft. "Sure, Mom. What's up?" "We've been doing a lot of thinking," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "and we realize how much we've hurt you. We're sorry, Ellie. We want to understand you better and support you in whatever way we can." Her words were a breakthrough, a sign that they were finally beginning to see me for who I was. "Thank you, Mom. That means a lot to me." "We're proud of you, Ellie. Truly," she added, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice. That evening I shared the conversation with Alex, and we both felt a sense of relief. It was a long journey, but we were making progress. I was carving out my own path, one that was defined by my choices and my happiness. As I sat in my studio reflecting on the past and looking towards the future, I felt a sense of peace. I had faced my fears, confronted my past, and emerged stronger. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to embrace it with open arms. My parents and I were still a work in progress, but I had hope that we could find a way to coexist, to support each other without the weight of old expectations. And with Alex and our children by my side, I knew I had everything I needed to continue building a life filled with love, creativity, and fulfillment. The journey was far from over, but I was on my way, choosing my own path with confidence and courage. The past might always be a part of me, but it didn't define me. I was Ellie, and I was enough. As the months passed, the boundaries I had set with my parents began to foster a healthier relationship. They were starting to respect my choices and understand the life I had built. The changes weren't immediate, but every small step forward felt like a victory. One day, Sarah called with exciting news. "Ellie, I've been offered a position at a firm nearby. I'm moving to your town." Her announcement took me by surprise, but I was genuinely happy. "That's amazing, Sarah. It'll be great to have you closer." When Sarah moved, we began to see each other regularly. Our bond grew stronger, free from the shadow of competition that had clouded our relationship for so long. We supported each other, and I finally felt like I had the sister I'd always wanted. Meanwhile, my parents were making efforts to be more involved in our lives without being overbearing. They visited often, spending time with their grandchildren and showing genuine interest in my art. It was still a work in progress, but the tension was easing. One weekend, we decided to have a family gathering at our home. My parents, Sarah, and a few close friends came over for a barbecue. As we sat in the backyard watching the kids play, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. My dad raised his glass for a toast. "To family," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "We've had our ups and downs, but I'm grateful for every one of you." "To family," we all echoed, clinking our glasses. Later that evening, as the sun set and the kids ran around catching fireflies, my mom approached me. "Ellie, can we talk?" "Of course, Mom," I replied, leading her to a quiet corner of the yard. She took a deep breath. "I want to thank you for giving us a second chance. I know we've made mistakes, and we're trying to be better." "I appreciate that, Mom," I said, my heart softening. "It hasn't been easy, but I'm glad we're working through it." "We're so proud of you, Ellie," she continued, her eyes brimming with tears. "You've built a beautiful life, and we're honored to be a part of it." Her words meant more to me than she could ever know. "Thank you, Mom. That means a lot." As we hugged, I felt a sense of closure. The wounds of the past hadn't fully healed, but they were mending. I had found my voice, asserted my worth, and created a space where I could thrive. The night ended with laughter and stories, a stark contrast to the strained gatherings of the past. We were beginning a new chapter, one defined by understanding, respect, and love. After everyone left, Alex and I sat on the porch watching the stars. "You did it, Ellie," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You've brought your family together." I smiled, leaning against him. "We did it, Alex. I couldn't have done it without you." He kissed my forehead. "I'm so proud of you. You're an amazing wife, mother, and artist." Tears of happiness welled up in my eyes. "Thank you. I'm proud of us, too." As I reflected on our journey, I realized how far we had come. From the days of feeling invisible and inadequate to standing tall in my own accomplishments, I had found my place. My parents' attempts to reconnect had been challenging, but they had also been an opportunity for growth and healing. In the end, I had built a life filled with love, creativity, and fulfillment. My past had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. I was Ellie, strong and resilient, surrounded by a family who loved me for who I was. To all of you who have followed my story, thank you for being a part of this journey. Your support and encouragement have meant the world to me. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that we all have the power to define our own paths and create our own happiness. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Have you ever faced similar challenges with your family? How did you overcome them? Let's continue this conversation and support each other in our journeys. Thank you for reading.